It was around 10:45 p.m. when my phone buzzed with a message I didn't expect. Hey. I missed the last bus. Can I crash at your place tonight? I stared at the screen for a good few seconds, heart racing, not because it was unusual, but because of who had sent it. It was her. My wife's best friend. The same woman who had always stayed just at the edge of being too familiar, too close, too knowing of things she shouldn't. And now, she was asking to stay the night. Alone. With me. I should have said no. I should have offered to book her a cab, maybe even called my wife to let her know what was going on. But I didn't. Instead, I replied, yeah, sure. I'll leave the door unlocked. And that one decision started a chain of moments I never saw coming. You know, it's funny how trust in a relationship can feel solid, until one small choice tests its foundation. My marriage wasn't perfect, but I never imagined I'd be the one bending it. That night started with awkward small talk, sitting opposite each other on the couch, pretending everything was normal. But her eyes said more than her words did. There was something behind the way she looked at me, curiosity, maybe even something darker. She was dressed simple, nothing inappropriate, yet somehow her presence felt loud in the silence of the house. I kept telling myself this was harmless. She's just here for the night. People crash at each other's places all the time. But my mind wouldn't rest. Was she really out of options? Or was there something more to this late-night visit? I tried to sleep. But the sound of the shower turning on made it impossible. It was just a few feet away from my room. And when she walked out, hair wet, face calm, wrapped in one of my wife's towels, something changed. She smiled and said, "Hope you don't mind." I couldn't sleep feeling all sticky. I don't know if it was guilt or temptation that hit me harder in that moment. Maybe both. But I do know that from that point on, whatever boundaries had existed between us began to blur. I kept thinking, what would my wife say if she walked in right now? And more disturbingly, why did part of me not care? There's a reason people say the line between right and wrong gets blurry when emotions get involved. This wasn't just a guest staying the night. This was something else, something that had been building for months, unnoticed by most, but undeniable now. The worst part? That night didn't end the way I thought it would. And the truth about what really happened, well, let's just say it changed everything in our lives forever. You think you know what infidelity looks like, sneaky, scandalous, obvious. But sometimes, it walks in dressed like a friend, and simply says, "I missed the last bus." And that's when the real story begins. We weren't strangers. Not by a long shot. In fact, I'd known her for almost 5 years, since the early days of my relationship with my wife. She was always around, always close. The kind of friend who never missed a birthday, always had a glass of wine in hand during weekend dinners, and shared inside jokes with both of us. But looking back now, there were signs. Little moments that I brushed off. A lingering touch on the arm when she laughed, the way her eyes held mine a little longer than they should have, or how she always seemed to find reasons to stop by when my wife wasn't home. But I never gave those things much weight. Until that night. She sat on the edge of the bed like it was no big deal, casually flipping through her phone, acting like this was the most normal thing in the world. Meanwhile, my mind was racing. Was I reading too much into this? Or was something about to happen that couldn't be undone? The house was quiet, except for the sound of the ceiling fan and my own pulse in my ears. I remembered how earlier that evening, my wife had called, laughing on the phone as she told me she'd be staying the night at her cousin's. She had no idea what was unfolding back home. No clue that the person she trusted most was now inches away from something she'd never be able to forgive. And then there was me, caught in the middle of two lives, two truths. One was the man I had always tried to be. The other was slowly creeping in through cracks I didn't know existed. She turned to me and said something I'll never forget. And it changed the whole direction of that night. GHT at me, her voice soft but steady. You ever wonder what your life would have been like if we had met first? I didn't answer. I couldn't. That question wasn't innocent, it carried weight. It carried history. And it forced open a door I'd tried hard to keep shut. Because deep down, a part of me had wondered. Not often, not seriously. But late at night, when things with my wife felt distant or dull, that thought had crept in. And now here she was, voicing it out loud, as if she already knew the answer. The room felt smaller after that. The air heavier. I kept thinking, was this all just coincidence? Or had this night been carefully set up from the start? I remembered how she had texted only minutes after the bus supposedly left, how she didn't even try suggesting a hotel, how she knew my wife was away. It all started to look different now. In the middle of this slow-burning tension, a memory flashed back to me. 2 months ago, my wife had gotten upset after seeing the two of us talking too long at a dinner party. At the time, she laughed it off, called herself silly jealous. But maybe she had felt something. Maybe she had sensed a shift before I even realized one was happening. And then there was another layer, my wife's sudden distance lately, her late nights out, the way she'd started locking her phone. Could it be that she was hiding something too? As I stood there with questions swirling, unsure of what this night was becoming, she leaned back on the bed and simply said, "You don't have to say anything. I already know." That's when I realized I wasn't the only one keeping secrets. I sat at the edge of the bed, unsure whether to stand up or stay frozen. Her words echoed in my head, "I already know." Know what, exactly? That I was weak? That something between us had always been unspoken but real? Or did she mean something more, something that went beyond tonight? Her tone wasn't playful anymore. It was quiet. Certain. Like she had planned for this moment long before she missed that so-called bus. I tried to keep the focus off myself. "Have you talked to her recently?" I asked, referring to my wife. She looked at me for a long second, then nodded slowly. "She tells me less these days," she said. "But I listen more." That answer felt layered. Cryptic. Like she was hinting at something bigger. The room was dim now, just the bedside lamp glowing faintly. I noticed her bag was tucked neatly near the closet, like she hadn't just dropped in for a night, but had actually moved in, mentally, emotionally. That scared me more than anything. And then my phone buzzed again. I picked it up, expecting maybe a text from my wife. But it wasn't her. It was from an unknown number. Just one line, "You really think she missed the bus?" My hands went cold. I looked at her. She didn't flinch, didn't ask who it was. She just smiled faintly like she already knew what I had seen. Suddenly, everything felt like a setup. Every word, every glance, every silence, it all came crashing down into a single thought, "I'm not in control here." And that's when she stood up, walked toward the window, and without turning around said, "You should probably check your front door." That's when my heart truly dropped. My feet felt like they were cemented to the floor. I didn't want to check the front door, but something in her voice, the calmness, the way she said it without emotion, told me I needed to. I walked down the hallway, every step echoing louder in my chest than in the quiet house. When I finally opened the door, the night air rushed in, and so did the reality staring me in the face. There was no one there. Just a small black envelope resting on the welcome mat. No name. No markings. I looked around the street, empty. The kind of quiet that suddenly feels staged. I picked up the envelope and shut the door, my fingers trembling as I opened it. Inside was a printed photo. Blurry, like it had been taken from a distance, through a window maybe. But clear enough to recognize what it showed. Me. In my living room. Earlier tonight. Sitting with her. Laughing. Her hand on my knee. I turned back toward the hallway, she was still in my room. Still acting like nothing had happened. My heart pounded harder. Who took that photo? Why send it to me? And why now? Then I remembered the security camera above my garage, something my wife insisted on installing months ago. I never paid much attention to it, but suddenly the thought struck me, what if this wasn't a warning? What if it was evidence? I rushed back into the bedroom, the photo still in my hand. She didn't even look surprised. In fact, she looked relieved. So, she said, now you see how deep this goes. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice almost breaking. She walked over slowly, her expression unreadable. I'm not here by accident, she whispered. And neither is that picture. Everything I thought I knew about the night collapsed. This wasn't about temptation. This wasn't about two people making a bad choice in a weak moment. This was something bigger. Planned. Measured. And the worst part? I was only just starting to understand that I wasn't the one being betrayed, I was the one being watched. And suddenly, I wasn't sure who the real threat in the house was anymore. I stared at her, trying to piece it all together. My heartbeat was a steady thump in my ears. Planned? I asked, almost whispering. By who? She stepped closer, her voice calm, almost too calm. Your wife, she said. She asked me to test you. The words didn't land at first. I laughed a little, confused, shaken. What? That doesn't even make sense. She knew something was off, she continued. The late replies, the distant tone, the excuses. She didn't want to accuse you without proof, so she asked me to find out. My legs gave out, and I sank into the edge of the bed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So all of this, the missed bus, the towel, the photo. All of it, she nodded. Your wife asked me to see if you'd crossed the line. She thought maybe I could pull it out of you. I didn't know whether to be angry, guilty, or heartbroken. My mind flashed through every moment of that night, every choice, every hesitation, every stare. I hadn't done anything, yet. But I knew I almost had. And now, she knew it too. She's on her way, she added, glancing at her phone. Told me she wanted to walk in and see the truth with her own eyes. I stood up, panic rising. This isn't fair. I didn't do anything. She looked at me, her eyes soft now, almost apologetic. But you wanted to. That's enough for her. Just then, the front door opened. I heard footsteps. My wife's voice called out, "Hello?" I turned toward the hallway, heart in my throat, ready to explain, to defend myself, to beg. But before I could move, the woman behind me whispered, "There's one more thing I didn't tell you." I turned around sharply. I've been in love with her too. And just like that, everything twisted again. It was never just about me. It was never just a trap. It was a triangle I never saw forming. And as my wife stepped into the room, seeing the two of us standing there in the middle of her plan, I realized, this story was never about infidelity. It was about loyalty. And who it really belonged to. My wife stood in the doorway, eyes darting between the two of us. She didn't look shocked. She didn't cry. She just let out a slow, tired breath like she had already grieved what she was about to witness. I tried to speak, to explain that nothing actually happened, that it was all just tension, suggestion, confusion, but the words didn't matter. The damage was already done. She walked in calmly, placed her keys on the dresser, and looked directly at me. I gave you the benefit of the doubt, she said. But deep down, I think I already knew. Her voice didn't carry anger, just exhaustion. Years of trust, slowly worn down by missed signs and silence. Then she turned to her best friend. And you? I told him, she replied quietly. I told him the truth. There was a long pause. My wife nodded slowly, then said something I'll never forget. Love doesn't always look like betrayal. Sometimes it's just people choosing each other, when they shouldn't. That night ended with her walking out, not in rage, but in quiet resolve. She packed a small bag, said she'd come back for the rest later, and left without looking back. I sat there for hours, trying to understand how everything had unraveled. A test of loyalty became a revelation of secrets no one was ready to hear. I didn't cheat, not physically. But emotionally? Maybe I had already crossed the line. In the days that followed, we talked once, briefly. She said she needed space. Time. And I respected that. As for her best friend, she disappeared too. No calls. No texts. It was like the moment she confessed her truth, her purpose in this story had ended. Looking back, the night she said she missed the last bus wasn't the beginning of something. It was the end of everything we thought we understood. A true story about infidelity, yes, but also about trust, emotional honesty, and the fragile lines we walk in relationships. Sometimes, the trail isn't about what we do. It's about what we let happen. And in that quiet space between truth and temptation, a whole life can change.